it should really have fallen on Bruce Arena and the players. What would you have done if you as U.S. president? Would you have stepped down? What would you have done differently than Galati after that failure and after, the heart of the American soccer community was just ripped out?
Well, let me be candid with you right up front. Number one, I would not have hired Bruce Arena for a second-round gig, number one. Number two, any good CEO or president of a company will ask themselves this one question when they're in a support role for multiple people. Did I do everything, or did she do everything in their best power and will to support the process? If they answer that question yes, they remain intact. If they answer that question no, then maybe they need to look inside themselves and say, did I have a direct effect on this outcome? So, did Galati have an effect direct on it? Probably not. But Galati has concentrated on the money of soccer the past 12 years and not the development side. So putting a president in charge of the USSF that has experiences to deal with a guy like Arena, Bruce Arena, is important. So from the technical department, development department, the curriculum that goes along with it, everybody has themselves to blame, but we need a leader to go ahead and enforce these programs. Number one, are we truly capitalizing on the talent level we have in this country from inner city all the way up to Major League Soccer? What's our pool, number one? Somebody's got to be held accountable. We gave Bruce, we have infrastructure, stadiums, state-of-the-art training facilities, dietitians, strength and speed and agility. We have everything from technical to physical to mental to tactical skills in this country, but yet we can't get out of our group. Why? We all know why. It's because we're not looking for, and we're not looking within the whole group, and that group is the whole country. Is there an 18-year-old player right now that's playing futsal in an inner city that could literally step on the grid right now and compete during a training session against the men's national U20 team players, or even the national team itself? Listen, we need more Paul Effects, we need more Tim Howards, but we can't put this team on the shoulders of an 18-year-old at this point. It's going to take a coach and a system to go out and find this talent. That's where the problem is we didn't find the talent. We just took whatever we got and threw it together and did some finger painting, and here we are now.
So you talk about that the development aspect and finding players, and a lot of people's arguments for promotion and relegation is that this would help expand that pool of sorts, and also with along the lines of figuring out solidarity, the compensation payments for acquiring players from youth clubs. So on that issue of the promotion relegation, I think you actually you mentioned a platform which was, I think, relatively interesting, and I think it's very reasonable to implement it on the lower levels and then see how that works out, and then potentially move to the higher level. So do you want to explain that, what your vision was and still is?
Yes, absolutely. And the vision is very clear because, remember, we're dealing with Major League Soccer, NASL, and USSL, or USL, that operate for profit, and they are registered businesses in the United States for profit, and they have a franchise system. We cannot just go in there and say, by the way, sorry, we don't like what you're doing because it's going to affect millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. We're going to change it, and good luck to you because we feel we should do this. So we can't do that legally. But what we can do is take the majority of the group underneath them, build the program, make the program, and a defined system, a defined program, which nobody's really presented at this point because we kick around pro rel as if we've been dealing with it for 30 years. Nobody heard the term until, at least the American soccer community, until the last maybe 5 or 6 years, maybe. So let's look at it from that point. But this is where I think what we should do is we concentrate on PDL, UPSL, NPSL, amateur ranks, state teams, local teams. We build the system within there. Whether there's money involved or not, let's just insert the pro-rel system, work out the kinks, use it as a test pilot, then we knock on the castle walls of the big three. And if NASL can survive the day, they're not going to be considered a big three. So there's only two of them left.
So what would you do, or what should we do with MLS? Because it's a single entity system, and I watched. This was with Grant Waugh. He was speaking with a bunch of coaches not too long ago, and then this might be a couple years, but the coaches were going yes, no with the promotion and relegation system. But the single entity system kind of protects that system, and then USL and the NESL. We talked with Stover, and we asked him if there could be a connection between the USL and NESL, and he said there can't be because USL has some sort of agreement with MLS. So it gets really difficult at top end.
Yes. I get the money part of it because that's what it's all about. And I've said this all along. If Major League Soccer won't entertain the system of pro-rel and want inclusion of it thereof, then let them fly in their own airspace because it's a franchise closed system. Let the rest of us move forward, within the same system and the same umbrella. MLS doesn't have to go away. They just don't want to be included. That's okay. That's why I call it a sandbox. You want to play in it or you don't.
So I guess it kind of be like letting the consumer decide which one is more entertaining to watch, or let their money talk to which one they like the most, and either force MLS's hand or have a league that grows better than them.
Well, money talks. Like I said, if Major League Soccer is all about the money side of it, which is okay, but I can't just blanket it about the money. This pro-rel is more about money. It's about opportunity, inclusion, player development, an easier pathway for players to be noticed. It's about affecting a small community and affecting a major expansion like Nashville. It's an inclusive system that can be instituted. But if the main topic is going to be, well, we paid $120 million for the franchise, that means we can't allow this guy to come in that didn't pay for it. There's a lot of red tape to be worked through. That's why we stay away from the franchise closed system right now, because that's what we're used to in America. Every sport that we have that has all the glory of what it is to be a major sports league throughout this world in the United States technically is a closed franchise system.
No, it
only
is.
Soccer is the world. Only soccer is the world's game.
No, yeah, but what the issue I guess would be is how do you get MLS to open up? What about the other candidates and their vision for promotion relegation? Because Kathy Carter came out saying, "Oh, we need to talk about it," but I guess it was kind of her. She didn't want to say no because she knew she would get backlash. There is quite a bit of people out there who I talk to, just local friends, who say, "Hey, what about promotion relegation?" We've talked about it multiple times. This is something that's on everybody's mind. This is not something that is cult-esque that you see sometimes on Twitter, but this is something that among a lot of people, this is a concern, and this is something, a talking point, because we can fantasize about having multiple teams from one city in the top division, how interesting that would be. We're based out of Dallas. We talked about, okay, what if Dallas had a team, or what if the area had a team in Fort Worth that would be in the second division? Maybe there's a team in Dallas in the third division. Or right now I'm at the University of Wisconsin. What if Madison had a team that was competing, and there's the opportunity to get promoted? I think the biggest issue with U.S. soccer is money, and you talk about this. To me, it's the cultural divide, and we still don't have the culture yet.
Right.
Recently,
Well, we have to deal with this is happening because the majority of the American soccer community wants pro-rel, but because we've already had a system in place for over 25 years now, that's closed, we're fighting against the brick wall and the castle wall, not the actual concept of what we're talking about. So that's the roadblock. How do you bridge those gaps? Well, you bang on Garber's door, you bang on Papadakis' door. You have the guts to go do it and say, listen, in the best interest of the sport, in the best interest of the majority of the American soccer culture, fan community, how can we make pro-rel happen without stepping on each other's business plan? How can we make everybody feel comfortable that this is the right thing to do? Because right now it's just a roadblock based on the history of how we've been operating.
I want to move on to the women's aspect because that seems to get absolutely no attention. As far as the women's game, all that's discussed pretty much in the media is about the pay gap, but the women's game has been really interesting because you do see. I always thought the contention here was to create the world's greatest women's league, but a lot of key players have left to go play in Europe to compete. Carly Lloyd at City, or Alex Morgan taking some time to go to Lyon. And but what's your take on the women's game?
Yeah, I love the women's game, and again, that's not a system that's broken. It lacks inclusion. It lacks media support, exposure levels. It's very attractive. It's just as exciting as the men's sport. But the reason why some of these players leave the United States borders is because there's more opportunity and a pathway to make a living in soccer if you're an elite player. Some Division II and Division III players out past our borders make more than a top-tier player possibly could make in Major League Soccer. So it all comes back to our system. We need to make it player and user-friendly for all. And if it takes pro-rel to do it, even within the women's ranks, with maybe not so many teams as participating as the men's do, I think pro-rel is appropriate even in the women's ranks, from the amateurs up to the NWSL. So that's a whole other subject. Talk about the women's game. I was the only candidate to come out with the first idea of providing them with an open cup. They deserve it. They should have it.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, Paul. I agree with that vision of an open cup. I think it's interesting. It provides competition, and it provides competition that the only thing the women have is the NWSL really in league play wise, and even that it's gaining a little bit of exposure, but it's still struggling to get that household that attracted household casual. My thing with the women's game is I feel like we, as a nation, we love our women's national team and we love them a lot. And it seems like everyone's like, oh, our women's team is great. But I mean, recently, I think our women's team is taking a little bit of a step back. I think the development has kind of lacked recently, and we've been relying on how good of players we have and their abilities. But we've seen countries come up that are playing better than the women's national team we have right now. So, what would your steps be to fix up some of the issues within the women's game?
Number one, like I said, exposure level is key, and having an open cup, regardless of how many teams participated in, I think is key because it opens up an attention span, maybe with some more television, to attract more investors, to attract markets in cities and towns that will support it. But let's face it, this is what's been happening is in the men's side of the game in the United States, we've been making boys and men stars before they're stars. And we promote them as if they're superstars before they're really an international star. In the women's game, we lack the exposure level of the very stardom that I'm talking about. So, I mean, let's look at the last 72 hours of news in the soccer world from a player standpoint in the women's game. Is Hope Solo. She's the most attractive player right now as a former player. But have we heard any more about the other women players in the United States as much as we do the men? We need to hear local stories about a player that's playing for a amateur team that has the potential to go